being after 6 o'clock, I would like to call the Tuesday, December 14th, Walpole School Building Committee meeting to order. Our first order of business is acknowledgement of public participation. And let me read this if I could. On June 16th, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until April 1st of 2022 of certain remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Next, if I could, Sue Lawson had sent me a note she'd like me to read to the rest of the committee, if I could. So this is her note. I wanted to take this opportunity to say how much I have enjoyed being a member of the school building committee as the finance committee's representative. I was thrilled when town meeting overwhelmingly approved the middle school project, and even more delighted when the community voted to move forward by such a large margin. This seems like an ideal time to step away so that my replacement, Allie Hamilton, can jump in just as the design phase begins. I wish you all the best as you continue your work to make this new middle school a reality, a place where the children of Walpole can learn and thrive. So that, again, is from Sue Lawson. And with that, I'd also like to welcome aboard Allie Hamilton, our new member. Welcome aboard, Allie.
Thank you, Mark.
And I think I'll turn the meeting over to Brian from there.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Also want to introduce a new Compass team member, Chin Lin. He's a senior project manager with Compass. He's been with us for several years now. He's taking over as a senior PM, which was Tony's role during the early phases. Tony has moved on to another project. Chin has been with us, like I said, for several years. He's an architect by trade with a lot of experience. He's worked on a lot of school projects, a lot of MSBA projects, and is also currently managing another couple of school projects for us as well. So here you'll be seeing Chin. He'll be handling a lot of the day-to-day, working closely with Tap Hayes' team, but also reporting to the building committee, et cetera. I'm not going anywhere, but Chin is being added to the team. And Chin, I think you can see everyone's name along with their faces, so you can kind of see everyone on the building committee. You've already met Patrick and Mark. Mary's admin for Bridget. Steve is principal at the Fisher Middle School. Bill's assistant super. Jack Fisher is a member of the building committee. I think you met Mike. He's finance for the school department. Ed's principal at Bird Middle School. Allie you just met. And Jen is a member of the school committee. Katia and is also, I believe, school committee, also a community member. Boris is a community member. Nancy Galvin is school committee. Ben Barrett is select board. Donnie Anderson's facilities. Jack Conroy is a member of the permanent building committee. So big group. We're really missing, I think, only one tonight, just Bridget, and you've already met Bridget. So with
Nice
that,
to
I'll
meet
share
you.
a quick update, and then really going to turn it over to Tap A at some point at the end. So we did minutes. We already talked about Allie joining the membership.
Actually, Brian, if I could interject, do this first, but we need to circle back to minutes. We didn't approve minutes yet.
Okay, we can do that. We can do that now if you'd like.
Okay, very good. Sorry for everybody to interrupt there. If everybody's had an opportunity to take a peek at the meeting minutes, if you have, I'd be willing to take a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 12th, 2021.
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Giositz, a second from Mr. Fisher. Let me poll the committee. Mr. Frisha.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton.
Abstain.
Very good. Ms. Gallivan. Oh, she's still
She's
connected.
having trouble with audio
Okay.
there.
Ms. Giositz.
Yes, approved.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
Mr. Conroy. Mr. Conroy? Back to you. Mr. Jack Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
Mr. Hahn.
Yes.
Mr. Senek.
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Did I miss anybody?
No, just circle back to Jack if he's it.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, we didn't get your vote either.
Yes.
Very good. And I think that's it. Thank you. It is a vote. All right, back to you, Brian, if we could.
Sure. Mark, did you want to talk about just open it up if any members, if they felt if they wanted to step aside also like Sue had done? I mean, now would be a good time. I don't know if there's a discussion there or not.
That is a good point. If anybody feels at any point as if, they've had their fill of this and they might want to hand the reins off to somebody else, this is probably not a bad juncture between the actual approval of the project and moving forward when things start to pick up. So if anybody has any inclination to kind of step aside, let us know at some point soon and we'll move on from there. Any questions or comments? All right, thanks, Brian. Back to you.
All right. So quick presentation. We did the minutes, committee membership, give you a couple updates on the MSBA. Moving forward with Compass and TAP A, a discussion on the CM at risk timeline, next steps. And we have some administrative stuff related to invoices from October and November. And then I'll turn it over to TAP A. Chris and Matt are here tonight to kind of walk you through the game plan for the next several months from a design perspective. So quick update regarding the project and MSBA items. So since last we met in October, obviously the project was approved. The scope and budget agreement, which is really the meat of what the MSBA, what you've signed up for with the MSBA regarding big picture on the project, that was executed by the town, returned back to the MSBA, and we did receive a signed copy back at the beginning of November. The project funding agreement, which really stipulates all of the financials of the project and memorializes the budget that we went through prior to town meeting. That draft was received by the town in second week of November. That everything was signed and turned back to the MSBA electronically the first week of December. I don't think we've received an executed copy back from the executive director of the MSBA yet, but that should be any moment. And once that is executed, we will enter the full project budget into their ProPay system. Compass is going to help with that with Mike Frisha, and that is the budget that will be hit against for all reimbursables moving forward on the project. So just like we entered the feasibility study, the budget for that first phase of design, and we're getting reimbursed for expenditures against that budget, we will enter the full budget into ProPay and start moving through design. There will be one more amendment to that project funding agreement. That'll be when the construction contract is finalized. So after bidding and procurement and everything is done, we will adjust the construction values accordingly and go from there. So MSBA is moving along. We've also circulated the amendments to Compass's contract and to TAP A's contract for the remainder of the job. This is design development through closeout, so post-construction. We had those proposals included in the budget that went into the MSBA that was approved and approved by town meeting. We've since finalized those proposals with TAP A, got those amendments over to Jim. He's reviewed those along with town council. And those are, I believe, teed up for the select board over the next 2 weeks to finalize and get those executed. In line with the budget, TAP A is actually a little bit under what was submitted to the MSBA for budget. So we're starting off on a good foot there. Jim, I don't know if there's anyone else to add to that or pretty much wraps it up.
No, just that the board's already voted to authorize me to sign all the related documents, but given the size and scope of the project docs, I thought it was appropriate to just bring it before the board, explain it, outline the budget, and ask them if they have any questions or concerns. I don't expect any issues, but I did want to provide the select board with the courtesy of doing that. And I'll provide this committee with a copy of that memo and the cost breakdown. That's
Yeah,
it.
I will note that we talked back in June, I believe, on some of the changes that the MSBA made to their budget process and to their project cost caps. Two changes that were made, they actually reduced, so to speak, the caps on designer and OPM fees. They used to basically take 10%, straight 10% of the estimated construction cost kind of as their cap, any fees that went over 10% for the designer and 3.5% for the OPM were deemed to be ineligible. In June, they lowered those caps and they said they would only fund up to $500 per square foot, regardless of the cost of the building. So they basically would assess their caps on those fees using a $500 square foot value. Both Compass's and TAP A's fees are under that cap. So there's no additional ineligible costs associated with the designer or OPM fees on this project, which is a good thing. That's not always the case. And that's not all the case on all of our school projects, especially from the designer's perspective. It can be difficult to get designer fees down under that cap on some of the bigger, more expensive projects. So far, I think budget is in good shape, and we'll keep moving forward with those items. Any
Ryan,
questions?
quick one. Ryan,
Yep. Jack?
just a quick one. When you talk about ProPay, that's the system that the state uses to
Correct.
track. So are we going to be seeing three separate sets of books right now? In the past, we basically had your reports that came from Compass, and there was a reconciliation between Compass and the town's accounting system. Now, do we have to do a third reconciliation between the town's accounting system and ProPay?
We do that reconciliation with the MSBA in advance. So when we tie out with the town in our budget, we've already lined up our budget with the MSBA.
So basically, this committee will be looking at, and you'll be reporting progress in the way that you've done it in the past, based upon the Compass systems with the breakout that you've done.
Yeah, so you'll have the same budget status report. Now we'll have the full project budget in there. You'll also have that report in the vendor invoice package, which is all of the reimbursement requests that have gone into the MSBA against that budget, what they've deemed ineligible. We actually start tracking the items that they kick out as ineligible every time we submit one of those. We actually track all of those. So that report will be in there as well. So you'll see that we are trending in line with what was deemed ineligible initially, or if something was flagged as, hey, this could be potentially ineligible. In addition to that, you'll get that information in the monthly report, but we will vet all of that in advance. And you will basically be looking at the budget update that we provide you that has already been tied up both with the MSBA and with the town.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? All right. Next item, statement risk. So the application is into the Inspector General's office. We're hoping to hear back potentially by the end of the month. Most likely it'll be early January, at which point with the notice proceed, we'll be able to issue the RFQ, request for qualifications for CM firms. This process is going to take us through the first few months of the new year. The goal would be to get a CM on board sometime in March, if possible, and it'll line up with a DD estimate to bring in the CM and allow them to work with that DD set to put together an estimate of their own. Two things that we do need to do. We do need to establish a pre-qualification committee. As part of the application, I think Tony was working with some of you over the summertime to gather up your resumes and qualifications that went in with the application. Basically, there'd be a group that after we issue the request for qualification, CM firms will, just like designers and OPMs, will submit their statements of qualifications, basically why they're qualified to do the job with their proposed teams, their experience, etc. This team would then evaluate that and narrow those respondents down to a short list that then a selection committee would finalize, rank proposals, etc., and also set up interviews. Typically, the pre-qualification committee and the selection committee are the same groups of people. They can be different, but a lot of times the first group just kind of runs right into the second group. The folks that we had been working with over the summer were Mike Frisha, Jack Conroy, Jeff and Jack Fisher, and Donnie Anderson. There'll also be representatives, Compass and TAP A will be part of this group. What I'd like to get tonight, is there anyone else that would like to be part of this, or is there anyone that's currently on this list that does not want to be part of the process moving forward? We will have to schedule a handful of meetings. They will be, since it's an appointed committee, they will be kind of open meeting law meetings. We will do that type of administrative stuff accordingly. Compass and TAP A will do most of the heavy lifting associated with this, but this group will really be the ones responsible for pre-qualifying potential respondents, and then eventually the selection committee for helping select the CM for the project. Any conversation there? Anyone else would like to be part of that? Anyone that's currently listed having second thoughts? No, we can move forward with that list there. I think that's a pretty good representation of the key folks from a construction and finance and facilities perspective.
Brian, the only question that I had was, is there a minimum that we need?
I believe it's 2 from the owner's side, from the town. I can double check. That's either 2 or 3, Boris, but typically it's 2, plus a representative from the designer and the OPM.
Okay. Then we meet those requirements, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mark, I don't know if you just want to take a formal vote or just put in the minutes that the folks listed will be part of the pre-qualification committee.
I don't think it requires a vote, Brian. I think it's just a continuation.
Yeah, as long as everyone's good, we can let the record show that these folks were appointed to the committee.
Very good.
Okay. All right, so we will work on the logistics.
Clarification, Brian, clarifications for
Mention.
both pre-qualification and selection, right?
Yeah, that's at this point, do we want it to continue and be the selection committee as well, or do we want to revisit after pre-qualification? There's no need to do that, but it is an option. I mean, my recommendation is these are the folks that would be in the interviews when we got to that point, and then make the recommendation to the committee. Anyone have any issues with that or concerns?
No, this is Ben. I think it makes sense to have the same folks involved all along, so that they're familiar with it. There won't be any learning curve, so that makes sense to me.
Okay.
I agree. It's Nancy.
Okay. All right, so we'll move forward with that. We'll put a little more meat on the schedule, start getting some of these, the documents ready to go. We'll be back with the draft RFQ to get that out the door in January at some point. And then we'll start setting up meetings accordingly. And we'll manage that process start to finish as far as all the administrative with the paperwork and work with the town to get things posted as needed. Great. And then finally, just cleaning up some administrative items, vendor invoice packages from October and November. The full packages were both included in the packet that went out in your email. The October invoices, compasses and tap A's totaled $66,795, and the November invoices totaled $62,936.75. Put into the budget through the end of November. This was the feasibility and study of the original schematic study budget of the original 1.5 million. So tracking under budget on that. There will be a carryover left over from the other. So as we manage the full project budget with the MSBA, we can talk about transferring these funds into other line items deeper in the budget. So feasibility and schematic at the end of the day is going to come in under budget is the big picture. And that's inclusive of those 2 sets of invoices that you saw there. Any questions on any of those invoices? We just need a motion to approve.
If we have no questions, I'd accept a motion to approve the vendor invoice packages from October and November of 2021.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Gallivan. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Senek. Let me poll the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton,
Abstain.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Ms. Giositz,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
Mr. Conroy.
Yeah.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
Mr. Senek,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor,
Yes.
and I vote yes. It is a vote. Back to you, Brian.
Well-timed dog bark. It was funny.
Yeah.
And just quickly, Jax, what we were referencing before, this is the spreadsheet that we were including during feasibility schematic, which is all of the reimbursement requests that had gone into the MSBA, what came back from the MSBA in forms of payments and how that was tracking against the reimbursement rate. And through November, as you can see, just over $1 million, almost 1.1 went in. to the MSBA in line with invoices through the end of October. Eligible costs were deemed to be just over $1 million, and the MSBA reimbursed $487,000. So in line with the 48.68 reimbursement rate for that phase of the job. So we will have this same type of report now for the entire budget. We'll track this all the way through construction. So you'll have approximately one payment request a month. So there'll probably be about 30 at the end of the day. And then there'll be a final one that'll clean up any ineligible costs, one last pass at everything as part of the final audit. So you'll get this every month as part of the VIP. And we'll know when we get into it towards the end of construction, they do cap that final reimbursement. They hold everything at 95%. So once they reach 95% of the facilities grant, they hold any payments back to the district until they do the final audit, but we'll worry about when we get there. So that was it. Overall budget was in good shape at the end of feasibility and schematic. With that, I will turn it over to Tape. Chris and Matt, are you able to share, or do you want me to just step through the slides? Not Patrick can make you a host, I think.
Yeah, you guys should be able to just share whatever you want. So,
Okay.
I think it should be sharing now, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Everybody see that fine?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're just going to give like a presentation or kind of update on the work plan and where we're heading from here. So starting at the beginning of this month, so just a few days ago, we picked up the design from the schematic design phase, and really the first steps of that are to go kind of like review where we landed in schematic design and try to figure out if there's any updates or changes from that. The design development phase is really the part where we start to put the detailed design together. So schematic is really just laying out schematic ideas around the building, and now we're putting in the detail to those. And so that's anything from the systems to, like, by that I mean in mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection systems, to some detail around how the program works and you know, the school day and students and circulation, and going to get into finishes and things like that in this phase and start to iron out a lot more detail so that we can layer in the next layer. So this phase is really capstoned by April 1st. So submission to the MSBA and an updated cost estimate that is going to be towards the end of March, included in that April submission. And we'll all keep our fingers crossed and sort of designed to understanding that the market is pretty volatile at the moment. So we have to be really on top of these cost estimates at this point in time and really keep track of where the design is going. So those are the key milestones of design development. And then as you can see, we're really at the beginning of that design development phase in this overall work plan. You can see we've really just started. And so going month by month, just kind of looking at what you can expect for design development. Here, in December, as I said, we just started. We're at this building committee meeting tonight, which is on the 14th. A big, as I kind of said before, some of the big things we're starting right now is to revisit, answer, and highlight any questions from schematic design that we may not have fully answered or developed during that phase. Reestablish some communication with local authorities and sort of organize meetings and schedules. And by that, I mean kind of re-kick off meetings with first responders, with facilities, with security, with the district and the leadership there, and start to set up design review strategies. So by that, we want to understand where we're headed in terms of the ability for this building committee to see things and understand it and have recommendations going forward, because we do have a timeline to maintain. So that's part of maybe the discussion in a few minutes on some of those design review strategies. So one of the key dates of December is obviously tonight, which is the December 14th building committee And then you can see that we have the working group scheduled every 2 weeks here as well. So in January, we're going to start looking at finishes of the building. We've already got some leads on those. I think Donnie's given us some ideas on some flooring materials and just some other ideas around the building that we're starting to layer into the documents. We want to really kind of kick into high gear the establishment and communication with utilities, so like Eversource and any kind of incoming utility planning we have to do. That usually takes a really long time, so we want to make sure we're ahead of that. And we've already got geotech and survey, some additional site stuff scheduled for those first weeks in January, so that's a good thing. And we're going to start to kick up revisit the sustainability. Remember, we talked back in SD about the Eversource Path 1 initiatives. And so we'll start to layer in all of the additional detail around those, that initiative and sustainability efforts, and look at the coordination of the building and systems. Again, taking a deep dive into those mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection systems, and making sure we're delivering the right building with the right energy usage and efficiencies. So again, here are the big building committee dates. These are the ones that you'll be aware of that we will have to be meeting on, are the 4th and the 18th of January. And you can see the working group dates selected in there. And intertwined into all of this are going to be meetings that, we don't necessarily publish on a calendar like this, but we're trying to set up all kinds of meetings and things with people as needed to understand and develop the details around the project. In February, really the big thing to do here, as I've mentioned before, is getting that design development cost estimate set out by the end of the month. And so we will, by the end of that month, be looking for some sign-offs, or so, that doesn't have to be like final sign-offs, but sort of really honing in and getting a collective agreement of direction on the design and planning side. So the floor plans, the design layouts, all of that stuff, and buy-in of materials and finishes, because those are what's going to be included in these cost estimates. And so again, we'll still be working on sustainability and coordination and systems. And those big committee meeting dates are February 1st and 15th. Again, looking to submit the cost estimates out to Compass's cost estimator and TAPA's cost estimator by the end of the month. And then in March, we will have a lot of work to sort of wrap up the DD process, and that's both compiling, it's compiling the MSBA submission, which is a big heavy binder, and then all of the project drawings and details that kind of take us to that next step. So we've layered in all of the information and systems, and we're starting to get sizing on duct runs and piping and horsepower on fans and, all the rest, and all the finishes of the building and lighting layouts and all of that fun stuff. So we'll start to hone in on that and package that up by the end of March. And then we will start to really look at the early package planning. So we've always known that we would need an early enabling package. Most of that work would be the road coming in from the west and up the side of the site, and creating the enabling area for the contractors to do lay down and the work on the new building, and also the bus loop and drop off loops and temporary parking and all of that stuff is all going to be part of that early package. And we need to just finalize that, all culminating in the submission on the 1st of April. And there is a potential likelihood that we will have 3 building committee meetings in March to sort of get all of that work done. And so you can see those laid out here in front of you. So that's what I have for the sort of direction that we're going, and I'll turn it back over to Brian to pick up from there.
Chris, we were going to talk about potentially streamlining that process by getting some representation from this committee. And one of the ways to do that is to get some reps on some user group meetings. So if we're having a meeting talking about interior finishes or exterior finishes or systems, if there's anyone from the committee that might be interested in attending that meeting, just to kind of understand a little bit more detail prior to bringing that stuff to this committee, for recommendations and or approval moving forward. That's something we want to talk about. I know you're identifying a handful, pretty much those two, maybe systems and maybe like a landscape. Anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think it'll be as far as public this meeting and this group goes, the committee goes. I think it's really 4 groups. That's interior finishes, as you said, exterior finishes, systems. So that's the MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection, and technology. I would include in there as well, just because those overlay with all of those, and then a site planning kind of user group that has a lot to do with the first responders, but also landscaping and just kind of operations outside the building. So those are my 4 big categories. And I think outside of that, I don't know if there's any other need, but I think, Brian, we would be looking for the potential to hold some of those user group meetings ahead of having a final building committee deliberation on that. And so if we could establish some groups, find interest of those on the committee, that would be helpful to us to just maintain the project schedule we just went over.
Absolutely. So those groups you said were technology, interior finishes. Are you separating exterior finishes from site landscaping?
I was, yeah, because that's a building element. So building, it's like building facade elements, interior, and then technology I was putting with the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
Yeah, maybe there might be a need to separate that. Also, so my suggestion is these will kind of be meetings that are scheduled throughout the week, because obviously they'll also have staff and administrative folks in them as they're going through some potential ideas and elements. I think maybe just think about it and reach out to Mark if you have an interest in serving on one of those user groups or being a contact that we can say, hey, we're having a user group meeting related to this. The representative can come to that meeting and just kind of understand stuff in a little bit more detail to help explain it when we get back to the building committee with kind of the final recommendations or presentations or whatever it is as far as that process goes. So Mark, I think probably just...
I can interject. So is everybody clear on that? What we're looking for here are, I don't know what to call them, subcommittees or working groups, people that want to get into some of the nitty gritty as to what exactly the exterior of the building is going to look like. What are the interior finishes going to look like? Everything that Brian and Chris have already mentioned. And, obviously with an eye as to what we want the building to have, but also at some point with an eye towards the budget. So if you could email me, and I just got your note, Katya, that's fine. If anybody could email me with any of those topics that they're interested in to be able to do some subcommittee work. It's extra meetings, that's fun. And that'll help the project move along.
Mark, I'll just clarify that this committee will ultimately see all of that as well. I just want to make sure you know that if you're not volunteering for extra work or extra meetings,
right,
you will still get the opportunity to see and opine on whatever is discussed. It's just these committees are, you might call them like steering groups that are kind of guiding us in the direction that those people feel like this committee would have a better appetite for. So that's all we're looking for, is just some steering.
Very good. Thanks, Chris.
All right, so we maybe get back to Mark by within the week or something like that, just so we can start to tee up those schedules and get working with TAP A as far as when some of these discussions will happen after the holidays. Foresee too many of them happening before that. But then that way we'll get the appropriate people tied into some of these user group meetings as needed to get some feedback prior to presenting to this committee. Other than that, that's all I had. Chris and Matt, I don't know if you had anything else.
I think we're good for this meeting, Brian. I think in the future meetings we'll have more to show and share. So this is really, we've only been at it for a couple of weeks here for DD. So
any questions overall on the kind of near-term schedule, basically the next several months to the beginning of April, which would be the next major MSBA submission, same process. That huge binder and plans and everything will go in along with the cost estimate. The MSBA will review that, send back pretty extensive checklist and their comments in addition to any of the reviews that this committee or Compass might be doing. And then we'll have to respond to those comments as we move into construction documents.
Hey, Brian, I have a quick question. This is Ben.
Yeah, and Nancy had her hand up too, I think so.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so are we going to use those slides that just came up as a calendar for the meetings of this committee? Are those the dates that we should be reserving for our meetings?
Yeah, we were trying to tee those up opposite the select board. I think we got those right. If we didn't, please let us know. And we will send out calendar placeholders after tonight's meeting. The thought is that we're having two a month. There's obviously going to be a lot more information design related in the next few months. And then the March will be extremely busy with getting that package put together and the estimate coming back and any implications from that. So we're going to schedule 2 a month, potentially 3 in March. And if we don't need one of those meetings for whatever reason, we can cancel them. But at least if we do need them, we'll at least be able to get enough information through the committee without having, one meeting that could be 3-4 hours getting through some of this information. So we thought, let's go with 2 and see how that goes. But we will send out invites so it's on everyone's calendar.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any final comments? Ms. Gallivan?
Sorry,
You-
yes. I'm just trying to understand, like, at what level of detail we have to be like participating right now. For example, is now the time to give input on what we're specifically going to use the technology labs for, or does that come later down the road? Do we need to be thinking about like what visual themes we want displayed in the building, like inspirational quotes, or is that further down the road?
Yeah, there's 2 answers to that. The environmental graphics or things like that you want like built in that we may do for like inspirational things. There's a lot of different ways that could happen, but yeah, we would want that to come forward. TAP A will probably, we've already got several locations where we've identified we want something to go there, but we haven't done the artwork for it or anything yet. And really, we'll want to know that as we head into DD, because we're going to start developing a whole bunch of renderings, and that might be a moment where you see the rendering and then it kind of becomes more real, and you can say, we would like for something to be there, and then we can do options for you on whatever that is. So we'll work through that with you as part of DD design development and working kind of into construction documents. And I think that'll be an ongoing thing that we can track and keep track, like keep that investigation going. The use of technology labs and things like that, we do need to iron out as soon as we can, because that has implications on infrastructure and other like operational issues. And so, in fact, we just had a meeting this week with Nancy and Bill and others and to talk through how we are going to get answers to some of these things that are question marks from SD. And so I think that we're already kind of pushing the ball forward to get the town to think about answers to those questions and get them to us in an appropriate time so that we can incorporate that into this round. But yeah, we need to get resolution to those really in the next couple months. So
yeah, Nancy, and I'll try to elaborate. Whereas schematic design was really talking about types of spaces and sizes of spaces and their location within the building and adjacencies, kind of that level of detail with not a whole lot else. I think now is the time to say, okay, within this space, has X, Y, and Z versus just applying a blanket square foot number to the whole building for electrical, so to speak. You're getting into that level of detail where this room has these features and, this type of cabinetry or this type of projector or whatever it might be. to that level of degree, we at least can start to put together that pricing list for your DD estimate. And then when we get into construction details, it'll be the very specific details that tradespeople need in order to install and connect and things like that, and dimensions and things of that nature. So I think we're getting that next layer on the cake, so to speak, of okay, now we have these spaces. What exactly are we putting in there? How are they? What amenities are those spaces having in a little bit more detail?
Brian?
Can I just do two quick ones, Jack, before you go to that? I'm wondering, the rest of the school committee, the members who are not on this board. So I'm thinking that we should have some of the discussion that you were just talking about, Brian, at a future school committee meeting, so that if there's somebody that has some ideas, we seek that input sooner rather than later. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would want to get those ideas or those comments, potentially, well, I would say at a committee meeting or through Bridget or yourself, into
Okay.
Bridget and Bill, and then into these user group meetings that TAPE is having. So it doesn't necessarily, we don't necessarily need to debate through all of these things at school committee meetings, but as long as we can get that information out as quickly as possible into Bridget and Bill's hands, so they can then coordinate accordingly with their teams.
Okay, so we'll get moving on that. The other one is, as we're talking about putting the road for the summertime, what's the plan to talk with the neighbors, if anything, or like what should we know about that part?
I think we had left it with them that we would have specific meetings moving forward. If the project moved forward with the direct abutters and the neighbors. They've obviously sent their concerns during feasibility and schematic. We received several in the last month related to some other topics. So now is the time to have those kind of focus meetings with, okay, we hear your concerns, maybe there's some additional concerns or questions that have come up, kind of gathering all that information. How are some of those things able to be addressed, if they're able to be addressed? And again, those are things that we'd want to know big picture on the site development, as far as do we need to account for certain features on the site to address some of those concerns and get those into a budget. So now's the time, and I think through the committee and Mark, we can start to set those meetings up to gather that feedback. And again, we still plan to have public outreach sessions through design. We're going to get those on the calendar as well when there's some more meat on the bones to provide updates and a chance for people to give some feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Jack, you had a question?
Yeah, well, a comment too is,
Yep.
Don't forget, Brian, my little talk down at the senior center, you're gonna come through a site plan through the planning board, which has been done with every school to date and every other public building. So that's where they have a chance, or anybody has a chance to talk about it. And that can be at the end after you get everything hammered out. You certainly don't want to do that without knowing where all the bumps are in the road. Okay. Now,
Yeah, we would typically, I think we would see that process start at the end of DD once we had site development, drainage, all that good stuff put together that you would typically get in a site plan review package.
now I'm going to go back to what Nancy was saying. She kind of started into it. My view in doing this all these years is this is your building meeting. This one, the school committee, and they should be the ones who are telling us what to do. I don't know where you need technology. I don't know where you need a mural. That's what the school committee and the school department should be giving to us, so that it's not, we shouldn't be making any decision, I guess, so to speak, on where stuff is going. They should have it all doped out ahead of time, what they want, because this is their building. So that's the stuff that's going to come. I look at it as, we're going to give you bricks and mortar. Outside we can do, because that's what we do, but inside it's 100% school, and they're the ones who need it, and they're the ones who know what they want. And that type of stuff shouldn't be left up to us. It should be, this is what we want, And then you take it, and then we can see if it's viable or whatever. But it has to come from the school, because I certainly don't want to hear later on, well, you guys gave us this and we didn't even have a chance. No, it's school committee's time to chime in on everything they want. This is their building, and that's kind of the way it should be.
Jack, I would agree. I would think school administration and staff would have even more input than school committee necessarily. And I think that's been pursued a little bit already, so.
Okay, and the other thing, I'll make another statement that I've done. I did it with the police, not so much with the fire, but I told at the time, the chief, John Carmichael, get everybody in your department heads, whether it be detectives, whether it be the dispatch, whatever, and go talk or go somewhere that's a school that's been like designed by TAPE, and talk to the people, like your head of your English department, your head of your computer department. Go and see a couple of schools and say, hey, what do you like about what you got and what you don't like, so that they understand. That really solves a lot of problems down the road. It worked out very well for the police station. We had very little changes requested by them. It worked out so that, you know, if someone says this outlet's no good here, it's as simple as that, because moving an outlet later on is going to cost you $2,000. So that's one thing that you might want to consider, is people who are going to occupy the school, whether it be the principal, the head of each department. Ask TAPE, similar schools or similar what's been done, and they can point you in the direction, and go talk to people and say, how do you like your layout? What could be better? What could be worse? I'm going to tell you, first off, it gets everybody involved. And the second is, what I like about it is, someone complains later, you just say, yeah, just shot.
Good point, Jack. Anybody else?
Yeah, Brian, I'm Mark, quick one.
Yes. Yeah.
Just to clarify, okay, the selection committee for the contractor at risk is going to start to review and do the pre-qualification with a selection. Ultimately, the target is to get that done in March. And at that point, once that selection is made, is the contractor involved in the design process? Or are they just standing by waiting for the design documents to be complete, released, and then they get involved? What's the philosophy of the involvement of the contractor? Because it looks like we're selecting the contractor well before, like 9 months before, we're actually going to have an approved design that they can actually go ahead and put out to bid.
Yeah, so Jack, so they will provide pre-construction services, and that can be a lot of different things depending on what we want and ask them to do. Typically, they bring in a pre-construction team that will work with TAPE. They will help do drawing reviews. They will do an estimate. They will be pricing things and doing constructability assessments with some of TAPE's designs and details. We'll be working with them in particular with putting together phasing and logistic plans, especially with maybe the enabling work related to that road. They will also be working with getting pricing together and filling in a lot of the details or holes that they see with documents that might need to be part of those early release sets. And then they'll do that all the way up through the end of design as well. So we can tailor their services based on our budget to provide those types of services, but that's typically what we would see. They'll bring their project manager on board. The superintendent will start to get involved as that person frees up closer to construction to go through construction details. But yes, they will be working as part of the design team in some capacity, basically once they get signed up all the way through to when they actually start construction. With one of the first things is kind of reviewing the drawings and doing that first estimate with what they see kind of with their market data. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's also part of the, when we get to it, some of the details around requests for qualifications, interview questions, et cetera, is to ask some of these firms, how do they approach it? What do they offer? What do they see works, doesn't work? How they've done things to, reduce costs or stake the budget or things like that during that pre-construction phase, and see who kind of rises to the top there in that category.
Okay. One other question, Mark. I think we're all concerned a little bit with what may be happening to construction costs as you said, I think, Chris, it's a really volatile market out there right now. Mike, normally what you do, I think you do probably 2 bottoms up full cost estimates. Are you looking at doing it more frequently, incrementally? Because what we don't want to do is get into a situation next February or March where we're badly surprised.
Yeah, so right now, Jack, the schedule, we will be doing 3 estimates, one at the end of DD, as Chris mentioned, in late March. We'll do another one at 60% construction documents, and then another one at 90% construction documents, basically just before the documents are completed and the bid sets are ready to go out to the trade contractors. And that's what the CM will also be pricing for their GMP. So we'll have 3 full estimates between TAP A, Compass, and even the CM will be doing an estimate to reconcile and kind of have 3 looks at the market. And the CM will also be plugged in, you know, as we're doing those estimates with kind of real-time pricing from some of the non-trade subcontractors, some of the suppliers and vendors. So that is one of the goals, is that you get a more up-to-date pricing set with what they're actually seeing versus maybe waiting for an estimator who might be relying on a bid that's a couple months old.
Okay, so basically you're going to do 3 full up bids and incrementally look at things that may be a little bit more volatile or subject to change.
Yeah, exactly. So like if you're working through the design and, you know, from the building committee's perspective, they want to look at, well, what's the difference between this, you know, this material or that material or something of that. You know, we'd have the ability to, you know, with the CM, reach right out to a vendor or a trade that could give us yeah, well, this is running at, you know, $80 a square foot and this is running at $50 a square foot. And that, you know, helps kind of make some of those decisions if we have to use that type of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question.
Right ahead, Jack.
All right, Brian. We need a big discussion on how we're releasing these bid packages,
Yes.
because my opinion is, and this is what I do, you shouldn't be bidding out the steel, the foundation, and then 6 months later bidding out the filed sub bids. By that time, it's too late. So, and I think I made the statement before, Brookline got their butt in a sling on the high school, because what they did is they released the steel, the concrete, and the site well ahead of everything else, and they blew their budget. On their second job, which I'm involved in, Driscoll School, they made Gilbane go out and get all the prices up front so that there'd be no surprise. I mean, you might have a couple spills one way or another, but there would be no surprises. And just so everybody understands is, you don't want to be down the road where, oh man, we should have knocked off something or cut some square footage back. It's too late at that time. Once you've released, especially the steel, the building's the building, that's the size. And that's what we need to really understand. And that's what needs to be discussed before we launch these and even award these. I would think they'd be all clustered within a period of a month.
Right, Jack. Same. We share that concern. You know, that is something that you need to be mindful of if and when you're planning early releases. So I agree. So that's part of kicking that conversation off, is like, let's get the strategy figured out around that. Let's rope that into how we deal with the CM when they come on board and kind of come up with a game plan that makes sense to avoid that situation.
Anybody else have any final comments? If not, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Santiago Catella. I don't know who made the motion though.
I'll make
I'll
it.
move, Mark. Okay.
All right, very good. A motion from Mr. Barrett, a second from Ms. Santiago Taylor. Like, pull the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan, Ms. Gallivan. She says yes. All right. Very good. Ms. Giositz,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Conroy. Mr. Conroy. Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Mr. Connor had to go to a concert. He's gone.
Okay, very good. Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
Mr. Senek,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor,
Yes.
and I vote yes. It is a vote. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Merry
night.
Christmas.